Gumball is full of references from different video games. From Mario to Pokemon to World of Warcraft, there are many more than you'd expect. So today, we're gonna be going over all of them, starting with arguably one of the most infamous video game franchises in the world, Mario. And we see our first Mario reference in the uncle. In this episode, Gumball really wants to meet Ocho's uncle. In fact, he wants to meet him so badly that he goes through literal Hurricane trials to become worthy of Ocho's friendship, even having to get fake kidnapped. Now, why would Gumball want to meet Ocho's uncle? Well, Ocho's uncle is actually Mario, like the real Mario. When Gumball goes to meet him, he acts like the streets of Elmore are one of the 2D Mario games, jumping around and stomping on citizens like they're Goombas, until he finally meets Mario. Yeah, Mario's looking a bit worse, and this literally traumatizes him. But what's even worse than the letdown of meeting Mario is stuck being friends with Ocho, so he needs to get rid of him somehow. 2000's R&B song later, Gumball is able to break up with Ocho without his bones getting broken up. However, once Ocho mentions his other uncle, the blue hedgehog that can run really fast, Gumball runs right back exactly the way OG Sonic would. But there's yet another Mario reference in the next episode, the Sidekick, where Gumball and Darwin lend Tobias a video game that they've been playing for a couple of weeks. Tobias just doesn't give it back, so Gumball leads the mission to get the game back. However, Darwin wants to lead this time, which causes a bunch of problems. Eventually, Gumball gives up and lets Darwin lead, and his great idea as a leader is to kidnap Tobias's mom. In the beginning, Gumball and Darwin try to recreate the game in real life, and we see that it's an 8-bit platformer game similar to Mario and Sonic. When Darwin hits the shed in the game, he even recoils like Sonic does when he gets hit. Next, we have the gift, and in this episode, Gumball and Darwin need to find a gift for Masami. The only problem being that Masami literally has everything, so they have no idea what to get her. They try every which way to find out, and eventually she reveals that she would like a McGraves painting. So Gumball and Darwin rush to the store to get one. However, everyone overheard, and they all race to the store. During the chase, Gumball takes down Ocho and uses him to take out the other students, just like how a Koopa shell works in Mario. As an added bonus, this scene is in 8-bit, just like the early Mario games. But Mario isn't the only mega famous franchise Nintendo has under its belt, as next, we're gonna look at the other Nintendo references in Gumball. First, let's look at the Promise. In this episode, Gumball and Darwin find out that Banana Joe hates them for always bailing on him, although Gumball doesn't really care. Darwin wants to make it up with Banana Joe, so he starts hanging out with him more and more, and eventually Joe asks Darwin to help him on a video he's making, which Darwin agrees to. However, this clashes with the release of the new Tale of Zelmore game, which Darwin promised to play on launch with Gumball. The Tale of Zelmore is clearly a play on the incredibly popular Legend of Zelda series, and when Gumball unboxes the game, he makes the Zelda chest opening noise. Up next, we have the Poltergeist, and in this episode, strange noises come from the attic, causing Richard to think that there are ghosts in the house. However, Gumball shows his siblings that it's just Mr. Robinson. He apparently just appeared in the shed one day, and Gumball kept him in the attic for some reason. Robinson tells the kids that he and Mrs. Robinson had separated because she thinks he's too nice. Eventually, Gumball and Darwin get Mr. Robinson out of the house and tries to get Mr. Robinson to take him back. Throughout the episode, Richard is convinced that there is a ghost in the house and arms himself with a vacuum cleaner, similar to Luigi's Poltergust from Luigi's Mansion. Now, we have the phone, and in this episode, Gumball and Darwin have been saving to get a new smartphone. However, they quickly realize that this isn't a smartphone, and instead is just a brick phone, which can only be used to make calls and messages. Gumball gets upset that no one is calling him, and gives it to Darwin, who immediately gets a call from Ocho. Eventually, Darwin gets addicted and ends up calling and texting Ocho, even getting his phone confiscated in the process. Gumball then gets fed up with this and texts Ocho a really mean message, and takes away Darwin's phone. Ocho doesn't take that too kindly and attacks the Watterson house. This entire episode is a massive parody of Space Raiders, one of the first big video games. Ocho himself is styled after one of the aliens from the game, and the final fight has Gumball and Darwin basically playing in real life Space Invaders. That moves us onto the flower, and in this episode, Gumball sees that Penny is getting really close to Leslie, and thinks that they're dating. thing. This makes Gumball extremely jealous to the point that it literally possesses him. They get the help of Carrie to try to expel the jealousy from his body, but the ritual goes wrong and the spirit of jealousy is let free. Just then, however, Leslie comes in with a vacuum cleaner and tries to suck up the spirit of jealousy like he's in Luigi's mansion. The traffic is the next episode we're going to be looking at. And in this episode, the family takes a trip to Daisyland, which Anais has always been wanting to go to. But every single time, one of the family members does something stupid to mess it up. However, this time has to go perfect, because Daisyland is closing. Things seem to be going good, but then it all falls apart. Anais tells her family that it's okay, but they don't accept that, with Gumball and Darwin running like Sonic to push the car out of its restraints. Lastly, we have the Vision, and in this episode, Gumball and Darwin accidentally take Alan's bag in gym class, and because they don't respect the idea of privacy, they decide to look inside the bag and find a USB drive. On this USB, they find a folder with plans to take over the school as the president and fix all the unhappy students by putting them in camps. Gumball and Darwin then plan to assassinate him before this can take place. One of the faces that Alan goes through looks exactly like Dr. Eggman from the Sonic games, and the whole face selection scene looks like it's from The Sims. Considering Gumball is a very family-friendly show, you might think that all the games they reference are also family-friendly, but we see in the allergy that that's not always the case. In this episode, Darwin just cannot stop sneezing for the life of him. You might also think that it's not a big deal since sneezes are harmless, but Darwin's sneezes are so powerful that it's destroying the school. They take Darwin to the nurse, where Terry is yapping to the school about the diseases she's having, one of them being the G virus. What you might not know is that the G virus actually came from the game Resident Evil, and is what causes people to turn into zombies. Continuing this theme, we have the parasite. In this episode, Gumball and Darwin read Anais's diary because they of course have no respect for her privacy, and see that she's made a new friend named Jody. It looks from the surface that Jody is using Anais to buy things and do her work. However, they soon find out that it was actually Anais who was the parasite, who was doing those things voluntarily to try to force herself to be Jody's friend. When Gumball is explaining how Jody is a parasite, he says that
she takes over your mind, attaches herself to your body, and before you know it, she's turned you into a fungus thingy so she can release her spores, contaminate more people, and destroy civilization as we know it.
This is exactly how the cordyceps viruses work in The Last of Us. Gumball even says after this that he stole the idea from a zombie video game. This is probably the most explicit reference that we've had so far. But to finish off the mature games references category, we have the episode The Box. In this episode, the Wattersons receive a mysterious package that is not theirs from the mail, and because none of them have any patience or respect for privacy, they don't want to open it. But before they do, they go through what they believe the package may contain. Nicole thinks it contains a bunch of money and reenacts No Country for Old Men. Richard thinks it contains the key to unlocking 100% of his mind, and Gumball thinks it contains a portal gun. The portal gun is obviously the iconic weapon from the game Portal. Now let's look at some more unconventional game references, and the uploads is up first. In this episode, Gumball and Darwin get glued to their computer and can't stop watching videos. One of the videos was of their dad doing a let's play of the hit game Calculator. Now many of you may be very surprised to know that Calculator is a real thing. I know, I was shocked too. However, I was even more shocked to find out that Calculator isn't actually a game, and instead is something used to do boring math. Seems like a waste of time to me. Now, although Calculator isn't an actual game, Richard does refer to some real games like Solitaire and Minesweeper, which if you don't know are both real games that are pre-installed into all old Windows devices, which means that Richard is so lazy that he can't even be bothered to download games onto his computer. The quest is next, and the reference in this episode is kind of strange. So in this episode, Gumball and Darwin need to help Anais get Daisy the donkey back from Tina, who stole it. However, Tina is not letting them get it back, and even sleeps with Daisy, making it really hard for the gang to get her back. Eventually, Gumball's able to grab it, but accidentally wakes up Tina, who chases after them. The interesting part about this entry is that there's no game that the episode is directly inspired by. However, the cultured ones in the audience know, back in the day on the Cartoon Network website, there was an entire game based off of this episode called Dino Donkey Dash. But now, let's look at all of the MMOs that Gumball's made fun of. The Points is up first, and in this episode, episode, Gumball and Darwin see that Tobias have absolutely mogged them in the game Gala Track because of all of the in-game purchases that he's done. Tobias tells them that he uses good boy points from his parents after doing chores, which he can use then to get real money. Tobias then says that Gumball and Darwin can earn good boy points by doing his chores too, which they do, until they realize that Tobias has just been using them to do his chores so that he can get money from his parents. The game Gala Track is clearly a play on StarCraft, since, well, it's also an MMO, which is exactly what Star Trek is. Also, in their final confrontation, Tobias and Gumball use a bunch of different weapons from games like a portal gun, an EMP from Halo, and a bunch of weapons in Half-Life. The code is next, and in this episode, Gumball and Darwin need to find out other ways to get entertainment because Mr. Robinson changed the password to the Wi-Fi, which they've been using this whole time. They try primitive ways to recreate things they would do with the internet, to moderate success, but then they realize they can't live like this, so they plan to break into Mr. Robinson's computer and find the Wi-Fi password. When Richard comes to tell the kids about the Wi-Fi, he's cosplaying as an elf because he was doing a raid when the Wi-Fi went down, meaning that the game he was playing was clearly World of Warcraft, which also meant that Richard finally got the motivation to download a game that doesn't resort to playing solitaire and calculator anymore. That's peak character development if you ask me. Now we have the slide. Gumball and Darwin try to find Rocky a girlfriend by using this new dating app called Trawler. However, Rocky is dead set on this girl that he saw at the mall, and just by chance he sees her on the dating app, but accidentally swipes up. So they have to race to find her before she leaves, which does not go as planned, even though they did get to her. She wanted nothing to do with Rocky. The boys cheer themselves up by playing a game, which the Gumball wiki thinks is supposed to be Minecraft, but I think is supposed to be an MMO, although I could just be reading into it. That moves us onto the one, and in this episode, Gumball and Darwin realize that Tobias has been acting strangely close to them, and eventually they realize that he's trying to become their best friend. To think that at the beginning, we had Gumball and Darwin literally paying to be Tobias's friends, and now we're here. But anyways, Gumball and Darwin tell him that Tobias is just a good friend, and instead of being okay with that, Tobias decides he needs to kill all of the friends that Gumball holds more near and dear to him. When he goes out to kill Leslie, he pulls out a massive sword from his coat. This could be another reference to Cloud from the Final Fantasy games. The boring is up next, and in this episode, Gumball and Darwin step all over Tina's artwork, which causes her to get mad and want to fight them. So Gumball and Darwin use Molly's yapping powers to stop time and prepare for the fight. When they're training up, it's oddly reminiscent of when you grind in World of Warcraft or RuneScape. But now let's look at our final MMO reference, which is in the distance. In this episode, Nicole is getting rightfully concerned about how close Gumball and Darwin have become. Like, they're literally bonding to each other. So Gumball and Darwin are put into different bedrooms, which absolutely devastates both of them. This leads them to being on call with each other all of the time, much to the anger of Anais. They also chat in the game and play together on the computer. The game they play is definitely one of those browser MMOs like Club Penguin, Moshi Monsters, or Habba Hotel. The reason I know it has to be one of these is because not only can we see the game in the episode, which looks exactly like the games I listed, but there's also, let's just say, Chris Tyson types on the game, which is just the nail in the coffin. But now let's get physical and move on to some Dance Dance Revolution references and Final Fantasy references. In The Founder, Nicole needs to give a file at work, but she brings Richard. She tells him to stay put, but Richard really needs a snack from the vending machine. However, it's employees only. But instead of saying that he's a regular employee, or just holding it in like a normal person, he tells them that he's the owner. Everyone now thinks that the founder is returned and starts to treat Richard like royalty. They ask what Richard wants to do with the place, and instead of admitting that he lied, he starts implementing strange things like dance pads in the elevator to make them work. The dance pads are a reference to the game Dance Dance Revolution and their iconic dance pads. Next, we have the drama, and in this episode, Gumball thinks that Carrie and Darwin's relationship has been going too well, and begins doubting that it's as good as it seems. Eventually, this doubt gets unbearable, and he starts looking into what Carrie and Darwin do, and see them go on a date. On their date, they play Dance Dance Revolution in the arcade. Or at least Darwin does, because he has legs. But now, let's look at all the fighting game references that Gumball has made. In the words, Gumball shows Darwin how easy it is to speak his mind. Darwin wants Gumball to teach him the ways, because he's super conscious about how his words affect people. Eventually, Darwin is able to freely speak his mind after Gumball's help. But he goes too far and just straight up starts insulting other people. After singing a big Disney villain song, Darwin has an insult battle with Gumball. This fight is styled like a fight from Street Fighter, with the characters even doing the signature Hadouken from the game. Now, we have the Society, and in this episode, Gumball tries out for the school play, where he acts like a total diva. He can't read his lines properly, and does completely different characters than what he's supposed to do, and just overall messes everything up. Mr. Small then asks for headshots, but because he's so extra, Gumball literally headshots Mr. Small with a bow and arrow. When Gumball is showing off all the different characters he can do, he does the Shoryuken, one of Ryu's signature moves in Street Fighter. Up next is the Secret. In this episode, Gumball and Darwin are locked in the bathroom, which causes them to divulge into secrets before they presumably die. Gumball shares one of his secrets about Darwin, and just as Darwin is about to tell his secret, Rocky opens the door, freeing both of them. However, Darwin doesn't finish his secret, which really infuriates Gumball, who starts literally torturing Darwin to find out what the secret is. While Gumball is contemplating on what to do, Darwin starts playing the fighting game that we saw in the third. In fact, we do see him do a finish him style move from Mortal Kombat. But lastly, for the fighting game references, we have the name. And in this episode, Gumball gets a high score in an arcade game and needs to enter his name. Problem is, Gumball doesn't fit, so Darwin suggests that he use his real name, which he doesn't remember. So Gumball vows to go on a quest to find his real name. That ends really quickly when Nicole just straight up tells him that his name is Zach. For some reason, this causes him to develop a new personality that takes over his entire life and makes him act like a douche. As for the game references, initially I thought that the fighting game Gumball plays in the beginning was just a nod to Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, just like all the other fighting games we've seen so far. However, this video from Ventoons points out that this fighting game is really similar to a game Double Dragon, with the back alley setting. He also points out that Anais living in a shoe is similar to how the Goombas in Mario 3 would also live sometimes in shoes. So for all the previous entries, they've maybe had one or two references in each episode. However, the episodes we're going to be looking at next are filled with different game references from different franchises and genres. Basically, all of the miscellaneous stuff that I could find. The blame is up first, and this episode is chock full of video game references. The episode revolves around Billy's mother, Felicity, believing that video games are quote-unquote blight on the youth, so she tries to get games banned. This leads to Gumball showing her all of the ways that games can have a positive impact on the world, but this falls flat when she ends up getting the video game ban passed. As I've previously said, this episode has a bunch of video game references. First, when Billy plays on the computer, his mind literally explodes, but mid-explosion, we see a bunch of video games, such as Space Invaders, Mario, and Tetris. When Gumball tries to show Felicity all of the ways that games are good, he shows her playing Wii Sports, Brickland, which is just Minecraft, and she shows her Tina playing the Game Boy Advance. The Ghouls is next, and in this episode, Gumball and Darwin spend Halloween trying to help the ghosts of Elmore, but they're not scary because nobody takes them seriously anymore. The beginning of the episode shows everyone trick-or-treating in Elmore, and all of their costumes. Some of their costumes are references to iconic media characters, including some video game characters. Sarah is dressed as Moon from Majora's Mask, Banana Joe is dressed up as Pikachu, and Richard is dressed up as Kratos from the God of War games. Now, we have the console, and just by the name alone, you can probably guess that there is a bunch of video game references in here. The episode starts with Richard gifting Gumball a new console, which he starts to play with, and immediately gets sucked into. He meets Darwin and Anais, and they form a party taking down enemy after enemy, until they find out that the true final boss was the console itself. The game's console is literally called a Game Child, clearly a riff on the Game Boy. The logo for the game is literally the same as Final Fantasy's logo. In fact, there are a bunch of Final Fantasy references, from the fighting system in each battle, to some of the attacks that the characters would do. Like Diamond Dust are literally moves from the Final Fantasy games. games. And Anais's giant sword and Gumball's goofy hair is a reference to the character Cloud from the same franchise. Whenever the game says attacks are not effective, it's a reference to the same line from the Pokemon games.
My butt uses axe. It is ineffective. My butt uses saw. It is ineffective.
Can my butt just use common sense and walk around it?
My butt uses sarcasm. It is ineffective.
The Score is the final episode we're going to be looking at today. And in this episode, Gumball and Darwin try to help out Ocho with his anger problems. First, they recommend a mindfulness app, which just has a bunch of ads, with one of them being a phone game that everyone gets ads for where there's a guy and there's 2 doors. One which will plus 10, and the other which will 2x. Everyone has seen that game, right? Anyways, the reason why Ocho is so mad is because basically his life is on hard mode. They parody a bunch of retro games, like Super Mario Kart, WarioWare, and the Game & Watch. Game & Watch is actually widely considered one of the first Nintendo games, so it's very fitting that it's the last game we talk about on this list. Well, those were all of the video game references that I could find in Gumball. If I missed any, make sure to drop them in the comments below, and while you're down there, you might as well subscribe. And if you're still here, click the video on screen. I'm sure you'll love it.